All right, guys, welcome back. We want to talk about a couple of myths that are up in the Football Manager tactical community. We see these pop up every once in a while, and they kind of drive you nuts once you know about them. The first one is one that I heard of once again fairly recently. It was that tactics will only work if you holiday, that is, downloaded tactics or certain tactical tricks. This is where you say, hey, try doing this or try doing that, and the response is inevitably, that doesn't work. That only works if you play in the holiday mode, and like if you go play a real game against the computer, like in real time, it doesn't work at all, right? That's what that argument is. There's a similar argument that comes up from time to time that says that a tactic only works for one season. In other words, I had great success with this tactic in one season, got promoted to the next league, and then all of a sudden it stopped working. So there must be something deficient with the tactic. Or as a lot of people say, oh, it must be some update to the match engine that completely nerfed this. I mean, maybe, but you'll find out that a lot of the people making even that match engine claim change are usually not people who are like playing thousands of matches and testing like everything out. And the third one that really drives me nuts is that the computer learns your tactic, right? So you can't use the same tactic over and over again because the computer will just learn it. None of these three are true. I mean, none of this is true at all. There's no truth to this whatsoever, right? So let's talk about this, and let's talk about what's actually true in tactics, right? I'm still learning about how this works, honestly, and I've been doing this for a couple of years now. There are a couple of things I've learned that did surprise me, but that nevertheless are true. The first one is that your player attributes matter a lot more than tactics. If you're having a hard time with any kind of tactic, it's usually because your players are not quite up to speed, or they might not be quite as good as the players that you're facing, right? So this is, I think, most evident if you have players who have low pace and low acceleration. If you're looking at your outfield players and you're wondering why they're playing so poorly, that would be the first place I would look, especially if you have a team with players that, I have that little coach report that says slow player. You got to watch out for that. That's not a good sign. You need to have players who are fast. In Football Manager, the big difference that you'll see between the really good teams and like the mediocre teams and the really bad teams, it all ends up coming down to speed. If you don't believe me, go take a look at it yourself, right? You might remember, this is a couple years ago now, if you watched Lelujo, he had Ricky J. Jones on Peterborough for a little while during one of these non-League to Legend saves. And the thing that was amazing is that even though Ricky J. Jones was inconsistent, he would still get so many opportunities to score because he was just faster than all of the competition. And so he would always be up front. He'd always be in a position to potentially score. And then if you got the consistent part of him, then he would score like 3 goals. If it was inconsistent, maybe he would get 1, right? That's how powerful pace is, and also acceleration. That's the ability of a player to like get behind another player. If you've been watching some of the games I've been playing recently, you'll see that we have defenders who are able to come from out of nowhere to intercept the ball and to create a shot, even though they shouldn't. These are not players who are like world beaters, right? These are just players who are fast, and that's what the game engine promotes. So keep that in mind. It's not just about pace and acceleration. Once you get to a certain level, all the players have good pace and acceleration, and then you have to look at a couple other attributes as well to figure out who's actually good and who's not. But if you're having a hard time with any tactic, that's the very first place I would look. What about pace and acceleration? The sad truth is that just about any tactic in Football Manager that is a normal tactic will work to an extent. And the way that you make it work is you have the right kind of players to play with this. Again, when I started playing Football Manager seriously, this is about 4 years ago now, when I started really getting into it and getting into the community, I remember seeing people who would talk about how to make a tactic on YouTube, but they would always choose a team like Borussia Dortmund. I mean, yeah, if you use Dortmund, you're going to be able to make any sort of like crazy good tactic that you can think of, right? Any tactic you make is going to look good if you have a team with a lot of good young players, right? And it's going to look like this tactic works really well and I'm a genius and all this stuff because the player attributes matter more than the tactics. Now, you can't go crazy, right? If you do the thing that they did on the Fumble Zone a couple of years ago where they made this really stupid thing that doesn't look like anything that doesn't work, it's not going to work in Football Manager, and it doesn't matter. You can have the best players in the world and they're not going to be able to do this. But if you really want to test it out, go grab like PSG or something like that, and give them a non-attacking like defensive tactic and see how many games they win. Do it with Liverpool or with Manchester City, and you'll see that you still have success with this team, even though you have a tactic that doesn't work. It's because you have good players, right? So that's the first thing. Player attributes matter more than tactics. If you're having problems, you got to look there first, especially if you're using a downloaded tactic, like from a well-tested source, I would say, right? Because there are some tactics that you download that really aren't that spectacular. Anyway, the second thing is that the computer doesn't learn what you're doing. The game engine does change a little bit from version to version, the match engine, but how much of a major change this is, I'm still a skeptic about, because tactics more or less will work just as well as they did before. There might be some marginal differences, but by and large, the game has not changed that much. All right, when we go to FM25 and we have a new game engine, that might be a little bit different. We'll see what happens then. But in terms of like the computer learning what you're doing, that doesn't happen. That is not a thing in Football Manager. Right, it just doesn't happen. There's not programs to be able to figure out what it is that you're doing and to counter. You can tell this if you just watch YouTubers' saves, right? If you're playing the game with the default stock settings on, you'll notice that the computer in big games will tend to field some sort of like really ridiculous, reactionary defensive tactic. And when the computer does that, you know that you're going to win. Defensive tactics in Football Manager give your team a disadvantage. And if the other team has players with attributes equal to or greater than yours, the chances are very, very good that you're going to lose, in part because you decided to have a defensive tactic. You're basically going to sit back and wait for them to attack. It's not going to work so well. Is that a good thing? Is that accurate? Is it realistic? I don't think so. I think that's really bad for the meta, but that's just the way that it is. There's nothing in here that has the computer learning from what you do and acting in response. I don't know of any soccer or football games that have that sort of characteristic. I know of at least 2 American football games that do. So it is possible to program things that way. But trust me, this is not something that I'm seeing as like a major priority for sports interactive. I really doubt that this would happen. If the computer could learn from your tactics, you would look at one of these super tactics after like 5,000 matches, and you would see that it did really well at the beginning, and then it started to go down until it was winning about 50% of the games or 60% or something like that, right? That's not what you see. I mean, there's just nothing that shows the computer uses the tactics. Go download a super tactic and give it a whirl yourself, and you'll see the same thing. And finally, the third thing that goes on that causes these rumors is Football Manager's random number generation, right? This is something we might talk about, I think, in a little bit later in another video. But random number generation in Football Manager is much, much larger and is much more consequential than you think. It's much more than I think, right? If you save scum, if you play the same match over and over and over and over again, no matter how outmatched you are, eventually you will win. You can go through a full save and save scum every single match and win every single match. It is possible. I've done it. I did it years ago, right? It's a good way to screw up your save. It's a good way to feel really bad about yourself, right? But you can do it, and it works, right? The reason why it works is because RNG in Football Manager is a major component of the game. This is the reason why on any given day, any team can beat any other team, right? So if you mess around with that, mess around with the RNG and keep everything else the same, what you'll learn is that, sometimes it goes in your favor, sometimes it doesn't go in your favor. It's just really completely random. This is why we need to look at very large sample sizes to sort of wash out all of the random number generation and make sure that we know what we're looking at, that we know for a fact that these attributes actually are better than those, and on and on and on, because RNG is pretty tremendous in this game. So once again, to recap, right, the excuses are tactics only work if you holiday. That's not true. You can test that out. Download a tactic and play game after game, and you'll find that, no, it actually does work. Tactics only work for one season. That's not true, because you see tactics that work well after 5,000 matches. And the AI learns your tactic, again, is not true, because after 5,000 matches, it still works. All of those are just garbage excuses. Get rid of them. The truth, again, is that attributes matter more than tactics. The computer cannot learn what you're doing. Right, there's no mechanism in the game to do that. You would be able to see it if it was there. And finally, Football Manager has really, really heavy random number generation, which is the source of all these rumors. There you have it. I'll talk with you again tomorrow. Bye.